All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Proactive Driver Retention, Employee Engagement and Motivation Strategies. We are excited to have the legend Mike Meredith as our guest speaker today. Mike's experience includes the Director of Professional Development of Haney Truck Lines for 10 years, Vice President for State Relations at the American Trucking Association for 6 years, and President and CEO of the Oregon Trucking Association for 21 years. Before we begin, a couple webinar housekeeping items. This webinar is scheduled for an hour, and we want to hear from your perspective about what is happening out there or what drivers are saying on these issues that they are having. The phones will be muted during the webinar, so please submit any questions or stories about what's happening in the chat box. I, Luke Kibbe, will be your moderator today, and I'm going to keep an eye on those messages in the chat box, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end to answer any questions. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded, and you will receive the presentation and link of the recording after the webinar. Please keep an eye out in your email box tomorrow. With that, let's go ahead and get started. According to the ATA's Trucking Activity Report, the annualized turnover rate for large truckload carriers with fleets more than $30 million in annual revenue, it jumped 6 points to 94%. And at smaller truckload carriers, the turnover rate was still 7 points higher than for the same period of the previous year. And the ATA said that carriers continue to struggle both recruiting and retaining quality drivers, leading to increased wages. And the tight driver market should continue and will be a source of concern for carriers in the months ahead. Glowstone is happy to introduce Mike Meredith to talk about the strategies for employee engagement and to hopefully prevent this turnover in your own company. I'm going to go ahead, we're going to pass the presentation over to Mike. Just give us a second while I do this. And Mike, you can go ahead and take it away when you are ready.
Hi, Luke. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Say, I just realized you're calling me a legend. I don't know if that means a nice way of saying I'm old or what, but glad to be here. I enjoy working with Glowstone and have for the last, year or so. Like the other webinar that we did, we've got a lot of territory to cover, so let's get right into it. First, I want to talk about a brief review of the takeaways that were discussed during the last webinar. First of all, we talked about turnover, and as Luke said, the turnover rate is exceeding 90% in most sectors of our industry. The average cost to replace a driver is about $6,500. That's average. I think it's actually going up from that. This is making it very difficult to find drivers. As Luke said, the number one problem in the industry is driver turnover. Larger carriers are throwing lots of money at it to solve the problem, and small carriers are going to have an impact on their ability to expand, and it will lower morale and productivity. The second thing we talked about is retention. A company invests its time and energy in bringing employees through the learning curve only to have them quit within the first 6 months. When a driver resigns, he's most likely to go to work for your competitor. So employee retention results in job satisfaction, improved productivity, better customer service, and increased profits. It's not easy. Retention takes a conscientious, organized effort that begins with creating a supportive organizational culture. We define culture as how your company conducts its business, treats its employees and customers and the people outside the organization. It includes the attitudes, prejudices, and beliefs that govern how people behave. And a lot of this is below the surface that you don't see all the time. Making cultural improvements is an ongoing process, and it requires a commitment of your time and energy. Less than 25% of corporate change initiatives succeed, but those that do so through changing the corporate culture. The solutions that I have been proposing and continue to propose is to build a corporate culture of engagement. This is where employees speak positively about the organization to its co-workers, their potential employees, and their customers. It's also where employees have an intense desire to stay with the company, remain there for many years. And finally, it's where employees are motivated to exert discretionary effort towards success in their job and for the company. I have 3 reasons why I think this is a viable solution. One is employee engagement will drastically reduce turnover. 75% of people who voluntarily leave a company don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. And 87% of those engaged will less likely leave the company. And Gallup organization has said that industries like ourselves can reduce turnover by as much as 25%. I've maintained for some time that retaining drivers, employees, or owner-operators ultimately comes down to whether or not your company values their contributions and cares about their well-being. My second argument is that a culture of engagement will improve worker productivity, maybe as much as 25% or more productivity improvements. But just about every measure of culture of engagement drastically improves productivity, including reduced internal theft, employee performance, and improved revenue. My third argument is that building a culture of engagement is, well, to use the words of candidate Donald Trump, what have you got to lose? Even a minimal investment will produce amazing results. Building a culture of engagement isn't easy, as I said. It takes having a strategy and keeping with it. In fact, most change initiatives aren't even led by top managers, and most of them begin without even having a budget. In fact, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, only a quarter of cultural change initiatives actually succeed. But those that do so through building up the corporate culture. I want to talk about what I call the road to engagement. Just like any effort, there's going to be obstacles along the way. But if your top performers keep leaving, the chances of your success are greatly diminished. As a manager, your job is to make it easy for your people to stay on this road. Now, maybe you're the type of person that doesn't think you're the one that can lead this charge. And if you are, let me remind you or show you an example of a quote from a friend of mine, Dave McLaughlin from Great West Casualty. Some organizations do not wait for leaders to appear. Rather, it looks for people within the organization that demonstrate potential and places them in circumstances where that potential can be developed. The barriers to keeping your people on the road to engagement include things that need to be removed, which I call junk piles. And I know this kind of sounds silly, calling things junk piles, but I think it's an easy way to understand how to motivate people and keep them on the road. Junk piles are negative things that need to be removed. Things like bad policies and procedures, intolerable working conditions, unpleasant co-worker relations, feelings of being laid off for not getting enough miles. The biggest pile of them all, of course, has to do with relationships they have with their supervisor. There are also going to be holes along the way. Holes are things that need to be filled. This includes wanting to be appreciated for what they do, the need to achieve results, opportunities for career advancement, and having a livable income. The problem is, problems can rarely be completely removed, and holes rarely can be completely filled. But when piles become mountains that your employees can't seem to plow through, or when holes become craters that they can't climb out of, they no longer believe that your organization cares about their well-being, and they'll leave. I want to give you a pretty good example of junk piles that relates to supervisor relations. According to the statistics that I've been able to find, 75% of employees admit their supervisor is the worst part of their job. 65% would rather have a new supervisor than a pay raise. And 86% of corporate executives and employees say that ineffective communication is the biggest reason for workplace failures. On the other side of the coin, 57% of supervisors say that they have learned their style through trial and error. 85% of success of a supervisor has to do with developing people skills, and yet only 15% has to do with technical knowledge. The final thing that I want to bring out is that a good supervisor can increase employee work productivity by as much as 11% per employee. So I put these two together, and I'm starting to see something that tells me that we are hiring supervisors based on technical competence, but we're not paying attention to training them on people skill competence. All right, so let's kind of drill down a little bit into what I'm talking about. These are junk piles of driver-supervisor relationships. The first one is called respect issues. This is where each party in a conversation needs to prevail over the other one. Conflicting opinions are seen as fights to win rather than dilemmas to grapple with. Relating issues. This is where both parties don't understand the role of the other party, and they don't have any empathy for how the other one's, the pressures and the stresses of one another's job. Finally, we have reciprocity issues. This is where when supervisors perceive that they have a low level of organizational support, when they believe that senior management doesn't value their contributions and cares little about their well-being, they show the same to their subordinates. Remember, supervisors have junk piles and chuck holes too. Okay, I would like to offer 5 steps on how to remove junk piles in this regard. The first one is set performance standards. Second is train supervisors to these standards. Third is establish programs that promote role appreciation. Fourth, poll employees to identify junk piles and chuck holes. And finally, select projects to improve perceived organizational support. I'll cover each one of these. The first one is set what I call HTMD standards. This means standards that you can hire to, standards that you can train to, standards that you can monitor, and standards that you can discipline to. Now, I don't know if you want to take these standards that I'm suggesting or come up with your own, but I would suggest that based upon studies that I've read on problems that supervisors encounter, the first one is coachability. This means the ability to accept and implement feedback from colleagues, customers, and others. The second one is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence means the ability to understand and manage one's own emotions and accurately assess other people's emotions. Third, drive. That means sufficient interest to achieve one's full potential and excel in the job. Fourth, temperament. That's having the attitude and personality suited to a particular job and work environment. And fifth, technical competence, which means functional or technical skills to do the job. I suspect that most companies emphasize the technical competence part of the standards to which they hire to. If you want to remove the junk piles, however, I think you need to start talking about other standards, such as coachability, emotional intelligence, drive, and temperament. Second suggestion is train to those standards. In my opinion, training should include a combination of leadership skills, communication skills, people skills, team building skills, problem solving skills, time management, confidence building, and resilience skills. If you need help, Glowstone is here to help you. Step 3, establish programs to promote role appreciation. One thing that we did at Haney Truck Line that I think had a very good response was what we called the Gemba walk. Gemba is actually a term that's used in Japan businesses where they take managers down to where the products are manufactured and have them observe the work that is being done by others. In our case, we requested that dispatchers at least once a year ride with their drivers, and that we asked the drivers to sit with their dispatchers. I'm not going to say that all of the dispatchers and all of the drivers like this idea, but I can tell you that those that did really had a positive experience from it. Number 4, poll your employees. It's your job to identify where the chuck holes and the junk piles exist. You can do that through employee surveys, exit interviews for sure, suggestion boxes, although I don't think you get a whole lot out of that. At Haney, we developed a driver committee that would meet once every quarter, very, very productive. And then, of course, having one-on-one conversations with your employees. Here again, if you need help on these, Glowstone is available. Step number 5 is after you've conducted all of this, pick 2 or 3 projects that you can use to improve organizational support. Retaining drivers, employees, and owner-operators, as I said before, ultimately comes down to whether or not your company values their contributions and cares about their well-being. And this is what perceived organizational support is all about. Let's move on to the second predictor of employee turnover. This is pay and benefits issues. I will tell you that the typical pay packages in our industry are mileage pay, bonuses, miscellaneous pay, vacation and holiday pay, sign-on bonuses, and insurance and retirement plans. All I can do today is discuss the pros and cons of each of these packages. I don't know your company, so I don't dare recommend the kinds of compensation and benefits package you need to provide your employees. But let's take a look at these chuck holes and see what employees need to have filled. We'll start with the crystal ball gazing. This is probably going to be worth every bit of the money you pay for. I'm not known for my ability to make good predictions. My first prediction, though, is that it's going to get worse before it gets better. 15% to 25% increases are predicted. Since private carriers exceed the salaries of their counterparts in the trucking industry, I think that we're going to see many qualified drivers move in the direction of hiring on with private carriers. Sometimes the pay differential is between $20,000 and $30,000. Third, and I never thought I would admit to this, but I think the time has come where the necessity is the mother of invention, and there's going to be a huge push for driverless trucks. I would imagine that if it happens, those trucks are going to be operating on the highways on long haul. I don't think we've perfected the technology yet that would allow a truck without a driver to maneuver through crowded city streets or perform complex backing procedures. But my final little prediction is that whatever changes happen, they're going to happen very, very quickly. ATA is saying that 2018 is going to be the year of the driver. And I think that over the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to see such phenomenal changes in the pay structure of drivers that we're going to look back on this as being something as big, if not bigger, than the role that deregulation played in our industry. Let's talk about mileage pay. Probably a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about now is things you already know. First of all, mileage pay is by far the most common way drivers are paid. The American Trucking Association predicts that we'll see increases between 4 to 7 cents this year. And they say the norm is likely to be between 45 and 55 cents per mile. Now, most drivers are not going to leave a company if there's only a 2 to 3 cent per mile pay difference. When it gets to the level of 5 or more cents per mile difference, they will start to leave. The other thing I want to bring out is when a driver calls your company looking for work, if the mileage pay that you're offering does not have at least equal to or greater than what he or she is presently getting, they'll move on to another carrier. Keeping your senior drivers is going to be critical. I would suggest that paying a differential mileage rate based upon experience is likely going to keep them. The downside of mileage pay is that it doesn't always pay drivers for filling out the things they do as a driver. Things like paperwork, fueling their trucks, and waiting to be loaded or unloaded. Because of this, some carriers are switching to hourly pay, which typically provides drivers with higher incomes and covers delays outside of their control. Performance bonuses. Companies are moving toward bonuses as a way to address the perceived inequities in mileage pay. These bonuses include usually safety, where you have no accidents, service, where your percentage of on-time deliveries is counted, and fuel efficiency. Unfortunately, some drivers have learned not to trust bonus programs. If they don't earn the bonus, they blame the system, and it doesn't always produce desired outcomes. Miscellaneous pay is a very hot issue in the industry. Drivers complain about who gets what loads. Mileage rates pay the same for all miles, but there can be a vast difference in time and effort required. Load and unload takes time. Some areas have limited backhauls, which require a driver to wait. And what I've found is the dispatchers try to placate drivers by promising better loads the next time, but this often doesn't meet the expectations of the drivers. Miscellaneous pay includes things like load and unload pay, premium pay for slow backhaul lanes, and premium pay for low mileage routes. Vacation and holiday pay. Most companies offer vacation pay based upon a driver's weekly earnings. Holiday is becoming more prevalent, but it's slow to catch on. This kind of pay is important to drivers, and to be competitive, it really should be offered. Most importantly is if it's offered to office personnel and maintenance people, vacation and holiday pay should be offered to your drivers. Sign-on bonuses. They're gaining in popularity, some as high as $7,500 or more. These will generate phone calls. I don't necessarily like them because it shows to me the desperation of hiring, but it will generate phone calls. The problem that I see with sign-on bonuses is in order for it to appeal to a driver, the payout has to be in alignment with the first 30 days of employment, which is the most critical point period of their coming to work for you. If it's stretched out too far, drivers will become skeptical and they will say, I'll never get that, so why should I even try? Benefits include health insurance, life insurance, and retirement insurance. Retirement plans appeal to 50-plus-year-olds, but they're difficult to administer. I would recommend on that you use a third-party administrator. Retirement plans, health insurance, and life insurance probably won't get the phones to ring, but it's essential to compete with other companies. So, where have we been? We've talked about why you should build a culture of engagement. Number one, to reduce turnover. 2, to improve workplace productivity. And 3, every small investment will generally reap a huge return. We also talked that building a culture is a journey and not an event. The manager's job is to make it easy for employees to stay, and the road to engagement is littered with junk piles and chuck holes. Junk piles are negative conditions that need to be removed, such as policies and procedures, working conditions, job insecurity, and supervisory relationships. Chuck holes, these are things that need to be filled. Recognition, achievement, advancement, and livable incomes. I've offered 5 solutions to remove junk piles. Set your standards that you can hire to, train to, monitor, and discipline to. Train your supervisors in how to work with their people. Encourage learning one another's business. Periodically polling your employees to identify chunk holes and junk piles. And finally, select a couple of projects to improve the culture. Next month, we're going to talk about how to fill chuck holes. Luke, I'm going to turn it back to you if there's any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. That was a lot of very valuable information. Whether you're a small company wanting to hire on new drivers and wanting to figure out how to do it right, or if you've been around as a small fleet to a large fleet, this is just a very valuable presentation on understanding and figuring out what are the best ways to engage your employees. We wanted to open up. We have some minutes to go over your questions. If I have not gotten any questions right now, we'll give you a couple minutes to dive into to type up your questions right now in the chat box. I'll give you a couple minutes to do so. Again, I just definitely do want to thank Mike Meredith on talking on this subject with his wealth of experience and expertise in the various fields here. And we understand, like Mike mentioned, the crystal ball of what could be coming down the road. As those things are being figured out, as the turnover is being figured out, as all of this happens, it's still an issue now. And that's why it's so important to remember about driver retention strategies, getting your processes in place now, from hiring, retaining, and getting your management staff on that right mindset. It looks like right now I don't have any questions, and so I'm going to go ahead and move on to a last announcement. We mentioned a lot of ways as managers to figure out how to engage your employees, those strategies to put in place in your management system. But hiring the right driver, retaining your best drivers, that strategy is at the very front part of all of this. And we are excited to be able to have Mike Meredith work alongside Glowstone with our driver retention program, where we offer a low-cost retention program that we can provide measurable results for, from a driver retention basic, where we offer professional one-on-one communications. That's Mike Meredith. Listening touch points with each new driver over the first 180 days. This is the most critical time for keeping that driver with your company. Retention Plus program, where we do provide exit interviews that can be a valuable tool to improve employee retention. We conduct a customized and comprehensive phone exit interview with each designated employee that you want to have in that program. And this service can be in conjunction with our basic program or just a standalone service. And lastly, we do provide an employee satisfaction survey. There is a minimum number of people that needs to be in this survey, but we work with your management team to customize an employee satisfaction survey that offers a method to collect and analyze the information from your most important assets, which are your employees. And this information is what's so valuable in understanding what are your drivers, what are your employees thinking about your management staff, your company, your pay, their expectations while on the road. There's a lot of value that can be gained from the employee satisfaction survey. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Glowstone Trucking Solutions. Visit us at www.glowstone.com, and you can also give us a call directly at 503-607-1088. If you have questions specifically for Mike Meredith, you can reach out to us and we can pass them along. I can send out an email with Mike's information if it makes sense to do so. If you're interested in the driver retention program, those emails do go to Mike Meredith. So be expected to be followed up by him for those. But for that, there's no other questions that popped up. So we thank you, Mike Meredith, for joining us today. We're going to conclude this webinar, and we'll see you next month. Have a great day.
Thank you.